welcome. Today we have a very special conversation around building a fertile tech ecosystem. I'm Laura Gaviria Halaby. I've had the opportunity to experience the evolution of the Latin America ecosystem, most recently with my last role at SoftBank Latin America, $8 billion fund dedicated to the region that started in 2019. And what we've seen is that you need, of course, to build a fertile tech ecosystem, visionary capital, also tech adoption, but most importantly, people. And that's why we're here today with three legendary entrepreneurs who have built amazing companies, and most importantly, they have laid the ground for the new generation of entrepreneurs to come. We have PierpaoloBarbieri, who's the founder of Uala, a neobank in Latam, who's democratizing access to financial services, with operations in Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil. Actually, in Argentina, sorry. Today, he was actually named one of the most powerful CEOs of Mexico, so congratulations.
And best dressed.
And best dressed for sure from all of the entrepreneurs. You never see someone like him dressed. And he is continuing to grow. He's onboarding hundreds of thousands of people every month. We have Carlos Garcia, who's the founder of Kavak, today the most valuable privately held company in Latin America. Kavak is a vertically integrated used car e-commerce and the dominant player in emerging markets. He's serving Latin America, Turkey, and last week announced the acquisition of a MENA company called CarCity. Welcome, Carlos. And we also have Sebastian Mejia, the founder of Rappi, a consumer tech company that provides delivery services from groceries to financial services to favors. Think of it as the remote control of your life. I know that Sebas doesn't necessarily like this analogy, but it's that. In Latam, we can't live without it. And has operations in several countries in the region, and was the first unicorn in Latin America, and most importantly, is actually the first company that SoftBank invested in the region in 2019. We also have Camilo, who's an operator turned VC, managing partner at Angel Ventures, an early stage fund that has been investing in the region since 2013. So we want to make the conversation as fluid as possible, so we thought it would be good to just tell stories. So I'm going to ask each of you to tell your story on how you started, what was building 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, your companies, and then we go with each one so that we have a much more fluid conversation. Sebas, let's start with you.
I was born in Colombia, and when I was 17, I moved to Europe to study. I was forced into entrepreneurship because I lost my dad when I was 20, so it was a moment where I had to provide for myself and the family, so that's when my journey started. Then I moved to New York in approximately 2009, and I continued building companies there, and prior to Rappi, I had the opportunity to build a software company that was operating around the world, and we had a vision of allowing CPG companies and retailers to be able to reach customers using technology and being the enabler of e-commerce. That was a very interesting experience because we were able to have a very global business from the onset, and we had operations in Europe, we had operations in India. I got to see very early on how Reliance Industries was starting Jio back in, I think it was 2014. So how they were building the infrastructure to digitize a whole country. I think that was very inspirational for me because I saw firsthand what technology could do in the frontiers and the emerging world, and how we could become a catalyst of real progress. Back in 2015, 2016, we wanted to start a different approach and start another company where we really solve the consumer problem of how you get products delivered in a really convenient way. And we wanted to create a company that changed the mindset of what you could do in this part of the world. Back then, it was really difficult to think that you could build a technology champion in this part of the world. It was very difficult to think that entrepreneurs in this part of the world were able to build a world-class company, a world-class product, compete with Silicon Valley companies. So we had some sort of complex or inability to dream bigger. And we wanted Rappi to be that company that opened our minds and inspired a whole cohort of other entrepreneurs. We started with a simple product that allowed customers to have groceries delivered to their door. And we had this button that allowed customers to have anything delivered in the form of a free text form. And we started seeing that customers were coming to us for a whole set of different categories, including restaurants, including big grocery orders, including pharmacy products, including other e-commerce categories. And that's how Rappi from the onset started to become a product that allows the customer to solve their day-to-day needs and expand the LTV of our customers in perpetuity. The typical journey of a customer, again, you're talking about Latin America, which is 35% or so of China's GDP, is twice the size of India and Southeast Asia. You have 650 million people. You have an incredible group of entrepreneurs and talented people. And you can build a company of this scale, but we wanted to start from the customer. So the journey allowed us to bring the customer, serve them in different categories, then make that customer Prime, which is our loyalty program. And then with all of that data and understanding of the customer, we're able to issue to them financial services, be able to build our own credit models with our own understanding of the customer. In parallel, what we built allowed us to actually become the infrastructure for a lot of different services that power e-commerce. So we build logistics from the ground up. We build payments in many, many parts of the payment flows from the ground up. We build fraud technology. We build marketing tools. And we're opening all of that technology for us, hundreds of thousands of merchants to digitize their business. So we think of Rappi as delivery commerce, but the foundation of technology, infrastructure for other companies to digitize their business. Back then, 2016, there was barely any venture capital in the region. A few $100 million were invested. No VC was able to actually take in Latin America seriously. We went to Y Combinator in the winter of 2016.
Was it the first Latin American company that went to YC?
I think it was like the third or so. But back then, going into YC was harder than getting into Harvard and MIT combined. It's like a very few percentage of companies get in. We raised our seed round from Andreessen, then Sequoia, then DST, then we brought SoftBank, T. Rowe Price, Tiger, just like a whole group of some of the best investors in the world. And since then, we've continued to grow the business. We're operating in 9 markets now. I also think what's happening in our region, we saw firsthand how the ecosystem developed, and Rappi has an extremely entrepreneurial culture where we're actually happy when people leave and go and start their own companies because we love that they operate in Rappi as entrepreneurs and owners. And Rappi is a business where you have to learn product, you have to learn technology, you have to learn operations, you have to learn the commercial side of things, become a leader. So Rappi is the company that creates the most amount of entrepreneurs. I would argue that probably in the world. We have more than 150 companies that have come out of Rappi with real traction. And I think there's lessons there on what could happen in this part of the world because Latin America, I think it's a little bit ahead, but what's happening here, I think, could be done in a better way even. And I think the other part that we've been reflecting a lot is that, especially in the emerging world, you're bringing this ethos of how to build a technology company as a startup. And you can build companies that are second to none, companies that are superior in product, in teams, in culture to the traditional companies that emerge in Silicon Valley, for example. So I think we're going to see in many categories real technology companies. I think we have we build products, and it's hard for us to actually find references. Like I think the way we solve products, create products, creates these very unique solutions and these very iconic companies that are leading, not following anyone in the world. And our belief is that you're going to see multi-billion-dollar companies emerge from not only the region, but I think if we look further into the future, that's going to be the case as well here in MENA. On the side, we also spend whenever we have time, I think the three of us share that. Like, we have a deep commitment with the ecosystem. We invest in upcoming founders. We mentor them. We support them. So we're very committed to making sure that that ecosystem thrives. And I believe that that's the most important engine of economic development that we have in the world.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit of more of context, in 2016 when they started, there were no unicorns in the traditional way that we're looking at them right now. In 2018, there were 3, right? And in 3 years, we went in Latin America from 3 to over close to 40 at this point. So the growth is incredible, and a lot of it's because of the infrastructure that these 3 amazing entrepreneurs have built. But let's go now to Carlos and his story, because you also had to bring and build a lot of the infrastructure to build Kavak on top of.
Thank you. And well, I'm from Venezuela. I'm 39 years old. I've been building most of my life. I come from a military family. Before I went to college, I went to 14 different schools. So for me, the constant movement was sort of my reality. By the time I was 24, I had built a fairly successful company in Venezuela for Venezuelan standards. And as any entrepreneur, when I did my exit, I decided to invest in real estate. And I invested in real estate in Venezuela, and I invested in real estate in the US, and this is 2007. My real estate in Venezuela got expropriated, and my real estate in the US got wiped out. And I ended up with the same amount of money that I had when I was 12 years old, when I started all of it. At that point, I was living in a country that was slowly going through a very difficult time, and I saw everything deteriorate, everything get destroyed, and a lot of value not created with all the energy that we had. And I decided to leave Venezuela when I was around 25 to go to Europe to reset myself. This was 2008, very, very difficult time to be unemployed. And my sister, on the other hand, who's my co-founder, she was perfect at everything. And she went to McKinsey, got an MBA, a Stanford MBA scholarship, and she calls me up. She says, Carlos, what are you doing? Well, I'm living on €2 a day. Why don't you come and visit me? And I went to visit her. She picks me up at the airport. And I go to this mansion where she lives with a bunch of people that are having an amazing time. Everybody's talking about changing the world. And I ask her, what is this? And she's like, this is an MBA. I'm like, oh, I need to get me one of those. And how do I do that? How do I start to think about that as an entrepreneur? And I came back to Europe with the ambition of getting an MBA. and I did. And I went to Oxford, and that led me to a job at Amazon. And in Amazon, they hired me in 2009 to figure out a way to control the marketplace because it was growing so fast, and the retail team did not necessarily want that to happen because they wanted to control the customer experience, and my job was just to understand that. And after a few months, I realized that it was unstoppable. You cannot control the marketplace, and I got obsessed about marketplaces. I got obsessed about the network dynamics, and I went back to Latin America with a new obsession, and it was to start Amazon in Latam, but I needed to pay for the MBA. So obviously I asked my sister, how do I get paid? And she told me, well, you have to go to McKinsey, and they're going to pay you enough for you to pay to your MBA. Spent 2 years there, realized that no CEO was talking about e-commerce, and that made me crazy. It's like, what are we doing right now? Like, look at what's happening to the world. And after 2 years, I decided to leave and start my first big company called Linio, which
This was which year?
2012. So this is really nothing.
Nothing.
And we decided to start it backed by a German incubator, and it was a journey of trying to sell products online and realizing that to do that you needed to create payment solutions that didn't exist. You needed to buy trucks to deliver product to people's home, understanding that in Latam only 1% of people have doormat, and if you want to deliver products, it's just impossible to take it there. Figuring out how to do it, cash on delivery, all of these things. And I was the oldest one, I was 28, and I decided, why not do it in 8 countries at the same time, right? It's just going to be as easy and scalable because it's tech. But tech without infrastructure in Latam is not just tech. And that left me a lot of scars, but it was a business that grew from 0 to 3,000 employees. We were sort of like a very, very, very small Rappi, later to come. And I left to build Kavak based on a personal experience of, throughout this experience, I tried to sell my car in Colombia. Somebody paid me the money. 10 minutes later, it disappeared from my account, and I lost that. Went to Mexico, bought another car, and the police stopped me, and all my documents were forged. So I started to think about, how many people are going through this process, and I learned that The market in Latam was huge. It was a $250 billion car market, but it was very informal compared to the rest of the world. 90% of transactions happen in informality, and that led to 40% fraud rate. And this fraud rate goes from being killed, losing all your money, and just buying I thought I was just dumb, that it happened to me twice, but it happened to a lot of people. And because of that, banks didn't want to finance the asset, and only 5% of the banks financed the cars. And when you take that to what that means to people, in the US, out of 10 people, 7 have cars. In Latin America, it's closer to 1.5. And that took me back to when I was 20 and I bought my first car. I used to use public transportation before that. And when I bought my first car at 20, 2 things changed for me. 1, I started to have more girlfriends. 2, not at a time, but I had more time. And 2, my business started to do better. So I ended up paying what was 80% of my income going to the car. After a couple of years, it was 10% of my income, and I was empathetic to that fact, and my mission has become since then to move that 1.5 out of 10 people to 7. And what I believe that we can do if we do it really well is if I eradicate fraud and provide a tool like a car to people that don't have cars, I can really change their lives. Today, we're in 10 countries. Well, let me start by how Sebas inspired my journey. After Linio, I had the scars of the 8 countries, and I said, I'm only going to build in Mexico. I have to focus. And we started at the same time in 2016, but these guys, they really took it to the next level. They went out and built this amazing company in all of these countries, and they did it better than we had done it in Linio. And I was just watching them sort of from the side, just seeing how these guys took on, they had the biggest balls I've ever seen. And I said, you know what? I need to be able to go to the same trips as Seba, to speak alongside him. And we went into our expansion. Today we're in 10 countries. We made our move outside of Latin America last year in Turkey. Now we're in the GCC. We're just excited to be here and having this opportunity to build. And we're proud that 40% of our customers today are buying their car for the first time. And after 18 months, they grow their income around 40 to 50%. And that's sort of the metric that we try to track, and that's sort of the impact that we're moving forward. But to do all of that, we had to build so much infrastructure, 1 million square meters of infrastructure, or 10 million square foot of infrastructure across the region. It's a business that I like to describe it as we have the complexity of a Spotify in terms of data and personalization, the operational complexity of a Toyota in terms of manufacturing, reconditioning, operation, logistics, and auto parts, the complexity of an Amazon in terms of the experience that you have to provide to your customers, with a caveat that my cars come back to haunt me through the warranty and through the service. And we're also building a huge financing solution. We have the complexity of a bank. So if you get all of these companies to have a party and have a kid, a dysfunctional kid like Kavak is born, and that's what I have to run. And I have to run it in 10 countries because of this guy. But I'm really happy just to have the opportunity to do it, and we're just so in love with the impact that it creates to our clients, and we just want to take it. We just want to take what we've built there. We want to take it to more people around the region, especially in emerging markets where things are tougher.
And just to highlight a couple of the things that said Carlos that are super important is, one, they all have a personal story that made them do what they did. And I think that's super important, and especially in emerging markets, and we see it a lot in Latin America, how you grew up, you saw a lot of problems and you're fixing real problems, which is a little bit different than in Silicon Valley that we see, which is much more impactful. It's almost about inclusion, most of the things that you're done. The other thing is about role models, right? So I think the good thing that you all are bringing to the table, but that started also a lot with Sebas, was when you saw building in Latin America, you were only building for your own country. And if for the first time, you're like, okay, I can think big enough to do it for the region, and I can be huge enough to build it also for the world. So we're starting to see all the components that make for a super fertile ecosystem. Let's go now to Pierpaolo and the problem that you were fixing and how you grew up as well.
Yeah, so I'm very inspired by these 2 stories. I'm truly an unlikely founder. I'm a historian by training. I wrote a book that nobody read. And so if you are interested in the history of Nazi economics, you can look it up on Amazon. For a while, we thought about sending the book with every card, and that way I would have sold quite a few books. But anyway, I grew up in Buenos Aires, spent 13 years in the U.S. doing first my academic work and then working in macroeconomics. I lived through the Argentine financial crisis of 2001, and without a scholarship, I wouldn't have been able to afford going to the US to study. And so my life was shaped by financial crisis. And as we thought about Uala, I wanted to create the channel for digitization, for people to pay for their Rappi orders, to pay for Spotify and Netflix. And the truth is that 50% of adults in Latin America are completely outside of the system. They don't have a payment mechanism that is in cash, and therefore they cannot build a credit history. And so they are at the mercy of people that charge them interest of 500, 600, 700% in the informal economy. Then they cannot invest, so they suffer inflation a lot more. And so when inflation rates, like in Venezuela or in Argentina, that means that the poor get hurt the most, and especially the women and the people in society that are outside the major cities. So what we wanted to build was something extremely simple, because I think that the most radical ideas are the simplest ones: an account for everyone with a payment mechanism for the modern world. And so as you think about your wallet today you are transacting digitally a lot more than you did last year, and a lot fewer transactions than you will do next year. 20% of transactions in Latin America are done digitally, but 70% in China, over 50% in India, over 50% in Europe, and 45% in the US. So the only thing I know every morning when I wake up, other than that it's going to be a long day, is that there are going to be more digital transactions than there were the day before. And so we wanted to build that very simple experience. And when we launched, there were only 14 of us. The head of the largest bank in Argentina said that I should stick to history and trading bonds, because I was okay at that, and not try to challenge that, because people would pay happily for opening accounts, maintaining accounts, and renewing accounts. And so what we tried to build was something simple that could build on the necessity of people to transact digitally. And so, 2 months after we launched, when we couldn't handle the demand, Netflix came and gave us their brand for free so we could advertise, and I couldn't believe it, because we were so small, and yet we were giving them new accounts, net new accounts. And in that way, we've built an engine that can sustain creating around 250,000 accounts. Having a bank when you have 0 customers makes no sense. So we started as a wallet, and then once you have 14% of the country, as we do in Argentina, or 30% of the young, you need a bank, because the incumbents cannot fight you on product. So they will try to capture the regulator so that you cannot exist. And so we eventually got a bank license in Argentina. We have a bank license in Colombia that took us only 35 months, and a bank license in Mexico that has taken us 19 months and counting, and with obviously regulatory processes in other markets. But if there is one thing we share with this region, is the lack of financial access. And there's a great opportunity to digitize more people. And I believe, and these other 2 amazing founders, far more impressive than me, can attest that competition elevates us. And so I really disagree with the idea that we have to build monopolies. What we really need to foster is competition so that there can be innovation. And so there are so many opportunities in this region, and we can export services from Latin America into the world. And so I believe that digitization in that sense is inexorable. And so we have to all walk together in that direction, and for that we need investment, for that we need creativity. And as we were saying in the previous panel, we need the minds that have left the region to come back, just like they're coming back to this region to create products and services that can help solve some of the deficiencies of our societies. And I always say in our town halls that you cannot ask people to believe in capitalism if we don't give them an account, or a way to save, or a way to invest, or a way to get a credit history so that they can have access to real credit. And in that sense, I think we share that with this region. And on top of that, I've built a small venture capital firm to give back to the ecosystem, and with the investors of Uala, including Sebas, we are trying to invest in the next generation of people. And I'm very proud that it's probably the first VC in Latin America led by a woman. And I think there's a great opportunity in the next generation of people who are going to be definitely better than me. I don't think better than them, but on that same direction. And there's even more opportunity because now we have infrastructure in the region.
Awesome. And talking about venture dollars, maybe we pass it back to Camilo to share a little bit on you started investing in 2013. How did you get there, and what was the ecosystem back then?
Yeah, hi, my name is CamiloKejner. I'm originally from Argentina, although I've been out of the country for almost 18 years now, last 10 in Mexico. And it's been a long road, and the fact that these three guys are here says a lot about where we were and where we are. And I'll try to very briefly summarize the path that it took to get to where we are in the ecosystem. So I worked private equity for many years before VC, and it's not a secret if you follow trends. I worked for a global private equity firm, and I wasn't focused in Latin America per se. Actually, Latin America was less than 5% of the market that I managed. But private equity in Latin America has not been successful as an asset class overall, save for a few exceptions in the last 20 years. So when we set out to launch Angel Ventures, what we noticed was a very simple failure in the system. A lot of people, like these guys, maybe younger versions of these guys, were coming back to Latin America after getting their MBAs, and after meeting tons of people who were starting companies in other more developed ecosystems, and they wanted to start companies, and absolutely no one was funding those companies at the time. So it was virtually impossible, unless you had the ability to get funded by friends and family, it was virtually impossible to get institutional capital to get a startup, or what the concept of a startup is, off the ground in the region. Proof of that is there were less than 10 VC firms that were actually active and had funds of sizes over $20 million back in 2012. There was just, that was it. Very little government involvement, very little, which to this day, sadly, still is true, pension fund involvement, which, as we all know, is a basic need that a healthy VC, local VC ecosystem needs to thrive. And so when we started, a good day at the office for my partner and I was when we had a meeting with a 70-year-old patriarch of a family who said, kids, I have no idea. Yes, we were kids back then as well. Kids, I have no idea what you want to do. I have no idea what you're proposing, but I do understand that if people like me don't invest in people like you, then there's not going to be a new generation of entrepreneurs in the region. And that was a good day. So here's, $500,000. Don't spend it all in one place. Tell me how we did. And we were thrilled with that. So we managed to raise a first fund. And that first fund it was a $20 million fund, which was big by 2012 standards. It made 21 investments, including the two largest pure Mexican fintech companies, Clip and Quesky. We were the first checks in both of those companies. To give you an idea of where we were in the market in terms of valuation, both checks at under $4 million valuation. Both companies now more than $1.5 billion in valuation. So they've gone a long way, and so has the market. But look, I'll go back to the most important thing, which they all briefly touched upon. They're all solving problems that are key to the region that we happen to think, and this is a very particular vision that we have at Angel Ventures, which is South-to-South collaboration and emerging market-based companies are the way to go. We think it's great that you have entrepreneurs that are focused on the region and thinking about expanding within the region, but to other emerging economies, and not necessarily looking at the US or Europe as expansion markets, which was what was happening 10, 15 years ago. That's one thing. The other thing is, for an ecosystem to thrive, and this is what excites me the most, we have always claimed that we need the first generation of locally grown and locally successful entrepreneurs to go full circle and become investors themselves. That there's nothing we have been wanting and needing more as an ecosystem, and we have that first generation, not only in these three guys, but in a bunch of other guys who are doing it, and that's
yeah, and maybe we can go with that, right? Because we went from friends and family and fools, which are usually called those friend rounds, to actually founders-led rounds, right? Which is more like capital of people like you that go into the system. maybe let's start again with Sebas. Like you mentioned a little bit, of course, that you've started to invest, of course, in early stage startups, but the most important part has been also the type of advice that you give, the coaching to these early on founders. Maybe going back to stories, why don't you share a little bit of one story of a founder that you have supported from day one, coached, and what are the challenges that you've helped them escape? That sometimes it's just that it saves them years of going through all the pains, and maybe we can go with each one of you on that sense.
I think before the stories, I think there's a bigger opportunity here, especially in the development of capital markets in tech specifically. I think we could be doing way more. I think in Latin America we have like a more fertile earlier stage, but then when you try to go later stage, it's just tougher, and then you end up going to the traditional international firms, mostly US. I think that's something that needs to change. And providing capital to the most successful companies is going to be a really good opportunity, I think, and something that could be done at a way bigger scale. And I think if you do that as a platform that is built by founders, then it becomes not only the capital, but I mean, we are in the arena every day, right? So we know all of the personal challenges that comes with being a founder, because it's as much as business skills as it is a personal journey that you need to constantly be scaling yourself. You constantly need to be going through a lot of different insecurities and learnings that we need to go. So it happens a lot with the founders that I support. There's a really deep personal component there that I think it's absolutely critical. It's a person at the end. And then the other thing is just really understanding their business, really understanding their product, and being able to provide like a very focused, detailed way of how to solve problems without the more generical advice, let's say. And I think when you're an operator, you know how to do that. When you're a founder, you know how to do that. So there's just a lot of instances when I do that personally, and it happens a lot with people that want to leave Rappi, and they probably don't even have an idea. They probably don't even know what they want to build. They don't know what product to create, and sometimes they're going for like a crazy idea. I just have a founder that left. She wants to start a consumer social product, which is really, really hard. But sometimes, even if you have a less than 5% probability of succeeding, you can have something that is very, very pretty much an outlier. So how did you actually go about creating your first product? How do you go about making sure that you have the capital that you need? Who are the right partners that you have? And that's something that we can be super, super influential. So that's that. And I think the last thing that I would say is making sure that you're building for the right reasons. Being an entrepreneur, it's not the easy path. It's not something that you do because it's cool. It's not something that you do because you want to appear in whatever cover. It requires enormous sacrifices. It requires a lot of grit. It's super fun as well. But I try to get that out of them and make sure that you have a founder that is going to be able to walk through walls, because there's going to be many walls, and that could go through pain because it's going to be painful. So making sure that they're connected at the right level and they're doing it for the right reasons. So I spend quite some time assessing that.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs that believe that, okay, I want to be my own boss and that's why I want to do this and I'm going to have more balance and flexibility. No, it's completely the opposite.
Not a lifestyle.
It's not a lifestyle. Carlos, do you have a story on one entrepreneur in particular that it's interesting and that you've coached and mentored and make their life a little bit easier on the building process?
So I don't have a specific story, but I can tell you a little bit about how I look at it. I've been investing for quite a while, invested in over 40 companies, 40 founders, and I'm still trying to figure out, what's my role in the investment. It's not only, just putting a check or supporting them with some information, knowledge, or whatever. Where I am today is that I realize that, you have to back companies and big opportunities and big problems that are being solved, and I think VCs and investors are doing a great job at doing that. But I think there's something that, there's a space of people forget that you have to back founders sometimes. I'm in
Just people.
I'm in the search of finding special people that I can see where they're coming from. I can see what they want to build. That have the ability to visualize. I'm trying to search, to understand what creates a great founder. And my common theme is, they have to see the future to build it. So they have the ability to visualize. They have the ability to tell the story. They have the ability to bring people on board. And I'm looking for those people and have the grit, the resilience to go through pain over and over and over again, and make sure that I can be there when nobody else is. Because what you don't want is these people to quit. You want them to, they probably won't be successful the first time, maybe not their second time, but when they're successful, they'll pay out. And I do that because it's a sort of a way to pay it forward to myself, because that was me. I went through that type of journey, and the only person that backed me up every single time was my dad, and it took him 37 years. And he backed me with it. He didn't have much, but so I'm in the lookout for that. It's just those people that you need to back, because they will create something great, not only in this company, the next, and the next.
Yeah.
And sort of that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I'm trying to discover, and I'm still in that process.
Awesome. Paola, how are you paying it forward to the ecosystem?
I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to give you a story, because you asked for stories.
Yay!
I'm going to give you a Seba story that he probably doesn't remember.
Okay.
But now he's afraid. No, but one of the hardest moments of my journey thus far, because I agree with the point about hardship. A great Argentine entrepreneur, a pioneer of the tech scene, once said that when you're an entrepreneur, especially in Latin America, 9 out of 10 days are bad and difficult, Wednesdays, casares. And you got to live for that 10th day, but you got to get through the 9. And one of those difficult 9s was the process of growing a company and going from 1 country to 3, and in a very regulated environment. And over the last 18 months, I have changed 50% of my management team. And when that process was starting, it was dawning on me that I was going to have to change, merge, upgrade, or fire some of my best friends in the world. And so I called Sebas, who's scaled, as Carlos was saying, a company faster than anyone could dream. And he gave me great advice about that. And it was the beginning of the journey, and at least I felt somebody was on my side. And the investors just give you the generic advice, well, there's people for the A round, and there's people for the C round, and there's people for the IPO. And I was like, okay, great. I'm sure you've copy-pasted that 1,000 times. But Sebas actually felt my pain and told me his story about having to do a similar thing, and it resonated with me in a way that helped me go through a very difficult part of the journey, but a necessary one. And I think that's what we have to try to do with people. My seed round was at 5 million. And so when I talk to new entrepreneurs, I think about this world and the previous world, and I talk to them about dilution. And I think many of them do not understand this, because they're obsessed with the idea of what the price of your round is. And I keep going back to the advice that, what you really need is the best team to do these disruptive ideas and the moonshot ideas. And that's what's going to change your region, your country, your industry. And if you, at the end of the journey, have 9.2% of the company or 9.4% of the company, it doesn't really matter. And so I think we have to give that advice, and we have to try to build an ecosystem, because the more companies like Rappi or Kavak that there are in our countries, the more innovation there will be, the more domestic opportunities there will be. And that means development, instead of losing talent to go to the US or go to Europe. There'll be people that come back and start things that give jobs, provide stability, provide opportunities, and help address some of the debts that our democracy has, like inclusion of women, like inclusion in financial services, inclusion in car ownership, or just the possibility of having people that used to not have a job, and now they work for Rappi and have a steady income with the prospect of making progress in life. And I think if we've had the chance to start a company, to pay it forward to other people so they can do the same and have that impact in society.
And I love your story. It's about people at the end of the day. And I was last week in a conference in Silicon Valley about Masters of Scale, and Satya Nadella was saying that the most important is for CEOs to understand that they should all evolve to be people officers. And it used to be that it was more about, no, the CEO has to be also the product, and it's all about the product, it's all about the tech, but it's really only about the people, right? And that's what's going to drive everything. So I love that all the stories end up to being able to hire the best people, but also to be able to coach yourself and coach others and being the best version of themselves. Let's go back to Camilo, and then let's bring stories back to this side of the region. You've been coming for several years to the region. What has evolved? What have you seen, and how does it compare or has synergies with Latin America?
Yeah, so we leave no stone unturned when it comes to fundraising, because fundraising in Latin America has always been and will continue to be hard, no matter who you are or how well you're doing things. It's cyclical, and at some points it gets more difficult. So it's only natural that not just managers, but also entrepreneurs begin to look outside of the region for funding. I mean, these guys are obviously funded by some of the best global VCs, but they all got their starts, and they had money, local money at the beginning. And that's something that we keep going back to, right? So, for example, we have 17 different nationalities in our investors, and that's by design. We've been going around the world since we started fundraising. And to give you an idea of the evolution of fundraising in this part of the world, when we first started coming here, and by here I mean GCC in general, not Saudi specifically, but Saudi in the last 5-6 years more. The initial conversations were like, there's a movie that we like to quote a lot that most of you probably have not seen, which is Eurotrip. That should tell you the intellectual level at Angel Ventures. But there's a phrase where they meet a truck driver and they don't speak the same language, and they're going, we need to go to Berlin, and the guy's going, I'm not going anywhere near Berlin. So that's pretty much the answer we had at the beginning for when we said, we're a Latin America focused fund. They were like, we're not going anywhere near Latin America. A lot of concerns, obviously, because what you read on the paper are not necessarily the good things about the region, right? We didn't necessarily, because I think that's changed a lot as well, get the best press, right? And what makes the headlines is not usually the best things, it's sometimes the not so good things. And we have to deal with that, and as Latin Americans, I think we learn to live with that on our daily lives, but we also know that's not all of the story. But how do you convince people from outside the region that that's not all of the story? Well, that's easier said than done. So things that we found is that you have to be here, you have to be present often, and you have to work it. And we are a lot more similar culturally than you may think initially. The same very strong family foundations, very strong friendly relationships as the basis for doing business as well. You're not just going to come and get money from the region and leave and report to them once a year. You have to cultivate the relationship, to mimic the name of the panel or the motive of the panel. So it's changed from we're not going anywhere near Latin America to tell me more about what's happening in Latin America to now you have some of the institutional investors in the region have finally, and when I say finally, I mean in the last 12 to 18 months, have expanded their mandates to be able to make investments in the region, and it's beginning to happen. So that's, in short, a little bit of the evolution, but it's still going to take some time, and we've been talking about this the last few days with the guys, and we acknowledge that it probably makes a lot more sense that they raise money before VC firms raise money from the region, and that they serve as ambassadors to other things that are happening in the region, that because of them, investors from this part of the world not only take a deeper look at what's happening, but also go to the region, because that's also important. The bond that is created when an investor that has never been to Latin America goes to Latin America is forever. And proof of that is that nothing makes for a quicker relationship builder with a foreign investor than when they have, even if it's the smallest tie to the strongest tie. Like, for example, a past Latin American girlfriend or boyfriend. Even that is enough to spark a little bit of interest or more knowledge in the region. But getting them there, I'll give you an example. We have a significant investment from a sovereign fund that for years they wouldn't even take our calls. When we got them to Mexico, a full delegation came. They spent 3 days in Mexico. and we have a lot of funny stories, but no time for that. But full delegation, 12 people. We didn't speak the language, but we spent 3 days together. We showed them some of the startups that not only that we had invested in, but also everything that was happening in the ecosystem. They met with a bunch of people. By the end of that trip, we had a closing dinner, and they told us, you know, we're going to do due diligence on you guys, just to check that, you know, you're not using Excel or something like that, which of course we were, because we couldn't afford, we still can't afford proper software. So we had built everything in macros in Excel, and then we will make an investment. And that turned into a $12 million investment. So it happens, it takes a lot of time, and we understand that, and you just have to be patient and work it. But I think the region is now very well represented. There's a number of amazing entrepreneurs, and investors from this part of the world are already noticing.
Yeah. And you're right, the press about Latin America is not very good outside LATAM, but the same happens, unfortunately, for the Middle East to the rest of the world. The region changes, this region changes so often and so quickly, kind of similar to Latin America, that I'm going to go back to my stories, because in addition to you guys being the best entrepreneur, you're the best storytellers. What has happened in this last trip that has evolved your thinking of MENA? Whoever wants to start, or you tell us.
It's been fascinating to be here. I'm married to a Turkish woman, so at least it's not exactly the same, but I always feel that familiarity with this part of the world. I feel that we share a lot of values, we share a lot of cultural traits, but we're still too apart. And those are bridges that we should definitely close really, really fast, because there's the knowledge sharing, there is a lot of value that can be created by just deepening the links between us and the region, and I expect to come more often and spend more time. Very inspired not only with the big thinking, the long-term thinking, but very inspired on how things are actually executed here. I think it's one of the bright spots in the world. Government organizations operate like companies. I think that's fascinating. Targets are set, goals are achieved, everyone understands them. That's an example of how to run things, I think, globally. It's one of the bright spots of optimism in the world, so that has been also really, really great. I think you pointed out also that press sometimes presents things in the wrong way. So getting on a plane, spending time on the ground really changes the perspective. I've seen it happening also in the other direction, where they look at Latin America and they focus on the inflation numbers or the president or who's next. We don't care about that. We're building technology for the long term. The secular trends are there. There's going to be volatility, but we've been trained. I think 3 of us have gone through how many crises in our lifetimes, and our products keep on growing and our businesses keep on growing. So I think there's work to be done there on just going a layer down and really understanding what's happening on the ground, and really understanding just in more granularity, not just reading the headline. So yeah, that's some of my reflections.
Yeah, I think similar to your reflections, I had to take a different, look at the region, because I'm launching a business here, and I've been on the ground almost a year with the team, understanding, seeing how we could be helpful. And I think I've been the past 15 days doing a complete immersion in the region, meeting everybody that I can meet to learn as much as I can. And I think, just to echo on what you're saying, there's a few things that I find that are amazing. One, there's a vision in the region. It's very difficult to find a place where they have such a clear vision on where they want to go. And that's something that definitely resonates with entrepreneurs. We have to have a clear vision. We have to know where we're going. You mentioned it. There's execution. The last time I came here was again with a call from my sister that she was at McKinsey, and she invited me to come to Dubai 15 years ago. And all the cranes of the world were here. And I came here now, and I was with Saul, my partner, and we were like, the only thing that we could say was, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, the execution that happened in the past 15 years has been it's radical. And that allows me to see that there's not only a vision, but, there's track record, similar to a startup in a similar way. And when I started talking to the people that run the region, the families, what you can see is that you're talking to entrepreneurs that are as ambitious as we are, that have similar problems that we have in terms of building the right infrastructure, that are hungry because they believe they're just getting started as we are in this point in time, because we've had a sheer amount of success, but I hope that's just the beginning of what we need to build. And you see a similar hunger, and it's just, I'm leaving, now tonight is inspired because you can see that perfect product market fit between an entrepreneur and what's being built in the region. And I think we need to bring more of that to our countries, more of that visibility to our countries as well, because the velocity that I think value is going to be created in the next 10 years here is definitely going to be, if I come back in 15 years, with what changed in the past 15 years, where we didn't have technology, where the region didn't have necessarily the tailwind that it's having today, I cannot imagine what's going to happen in the next 15 years. And I for sure want to be there to put my part and play my role in that transition. And that's what I'm taking. I'm just inspired and want to be as supportive as I can and learn as much as I can through it.
And it's crazy because we come from Latin America, where you still feel the energy and the excitement around the region and building, and it's growing. And the US is the same thing, it's full of energy. But we're here, and it has significantly changed. Like, this is like 10 times now. Like, you see everybody going to the same place. Like, it's really 2019 of Latam. So it's really exciting to feel that, and we all want to come back. I haven't been in a place in a while that the only thing that I'm thinking is, okay, when are we planning our next trip?
Yeah, and like, I was in New York for a couple of weeks the other day, and like this is my correlation of my perception right now, and I'm obviously in a high from 15 days here, but you're in New York, in the other side of the world, in America, you're talking to incumbents, you're talking to slower companies. When you come here, you feel that startup vibe all over again, and that vibe is very similar to the vibe that you feel in Latin America. Both regions have deep issues, deep things to fix, and I think it's impossible for us not to create those connections, those learning experience, because the biggest companies, the biggest problems need to be solved in emerging markets at this point in time. In the US, in these primary markets, there's problem to solve, but they're trying to solve whether you have to put this way or put it this way, which is great, but here you're solving financial inclusion problems, logistical problems. It's just amazing as well to that correlation between LATAM and MENA in terms of the problems that you have to solve as an entrepreneur today are the real ones that will impact people.
Yeah, you're solving problems that are changing people's lives for sure. The other one is just making you more productive, maybe.
I would slightly disagree with. I think that
with our excitement, we were so happy.
Not with the excitement, but with the perception of the U.S. I think that there's an important value in how risk is perceived, and we cannot but admit that the culture of Silicon Valley, which, as we said in the other panel, isn't a place, it's a mindset, and the perception of how risk is rewarded has to be changed in many of our societies. And part of the conversations that we've been having over the last few days are about the cultural and philosophical change that has happened over the last decade in this region of the world, where the vision that the guys are talking about is underpinned by a different philosophical perception of risk and the reward that can come from entrepreneurship. And so we need societies that foster that, and you can feel it here. That was, in one way or another, born in the culture of Silicon Valley, where failure is celebrated instead of chastised. And I don't see that in Europe. My family, as it's obvious from my name, comes from Italy, where there is no culture of that. And I think entrepreneurs like Carlos and Sebas are building that in Latin America. It's important to have it, and we're starting to see it here. So I feel the same excitement, but I think it's about the export of this philosophy of how to think about risk, think about reward, and think about failure and success. And if you don't have that, then you'll have a society where your main goal in life, as it has happened, and I'll say it within my family, is to go to a government institution and just have the same job for 40 years. And that won't create the Kavak of Italy. And that cultural change is something to aspire to, and I think in this region, the vision to create a better future and a more integrated future with the rest of the world and a more diversified future, not depending on one commodity for the future, but a variety of industries in a more balanced economy creates the right incentives to create new companies and new opportunities.
Yeah. Well, with that, we're closing. I think for us, this has been an amazing experience to be here, to bring a little bit of Latin America to the Middle East. We hope to be here many more times and to build those bridges, to share that knowledge. So thank you so much for listening to us, and we're really humble with the hospitality of Saudi Arabia, and we want to be here soon. So thank you all of you for joining me.